Nombres by Julia Alvarez. When we arrived in New York City, our names changed almost immediately. At immigration, the officer asked my father, Mr. Alvarez, if he had anything to declare. My father shook his head no, and we were waved through. I was too afraid we wouldn't be let in if I corrected the man's pronunciation, but I said our name to myself, opening my mouth wide for the organ blast of the A, trilling my tongue for the drum roll of the R. Alvarez. How could anyone get Alvarez out of that orchestra of sound? At the hotel, my mother was Mrs. Alvarez, and I was little girl, as in, hey, little girl, stop riding the elevator up and down. It's not a toy. When we moved into our new apartment building, the super called my father Mr. Alvarez, and the neighbors who became mother's friends pronounced her name Julia instead of Julia. I, as her namesake, was known as Julita at home, but at school I was Judy or Judith, and once an English teacher mistook me for Juliet. It took me a while to get used to my new names. I wondered if I shouldn't correct my teachers and new friends, but my mother argued that it didn't matter. You know what your friend Shakespeare said, a rose by any other name would smell as sweet. My family had gotten into the habit of calling any famous author my friend because I had begun to write poems and stories in English class. By the time I was in high school, I was a popular kid, and it showed in my name. Friends called me Jules or Hey Jude, and once a group of troublemaking friends my mother forbade me to hang out with called me Alcatraz. I was Julia only to Mommy and Papi, and uncles and aunts who came over to eat sancocho on Sunday afternoons, old world folk whom I would just as soon go back to where they came from and leave me to pursue whatever mischief I wanted to in America. Judy Alcatraz, the name on the wanted poster would read. Who would ever trace her to me? My older sister had the hardest time getting an American name for herself because Mauricia did not translate into English. Ironically, although she had the most foreign-sounding name, she and I were the Americans in the family. We had been born in New York City when our parents had first tried immigration and then gone back home, too homesick to stay. My mother often told the story of how she had almost changed my sister's name in the hospital. After the delivery, Mommy and some other new mothers were cooing over their new baby sons and daughters and exchanging names and weights and delivery stories. My mother was embarrassed among the Sallys and Janes and Georges and Johns to reveal the rich, noisy name of Mauricia. So when her turn came to brag, she gave her baby's name as Maureen. Why'd you give her an Irish name with so many pretty Spanish names to choose from? One of the women asked. My mother blushed and admitted that her baby's real name to the group. Her mother-in-law had recently died, she apologized, and her husband had insisted that the first daughter be named after his mother, Mauran. My mother thought it the ugliest name she'd ever heard, and she talked my father into what she believed was an improvement, a combination of Mauran and her own mother's name, Felicia. Her name is Mauricia, my mother said to the group of women. Why, that's a beautiful name, the new mothers cried. Mauricia, Mauricia, they cooed into the pink blanket. Mauricia it was when we returned to the States 11 years later. Sometimes American tongues found even that mispronunciation tough to say and called her Maria or Marcia or Maudi from her nickname Mauri. I pitied her. What an awful name to have to transport across borders. My little sister, Anna, had the easiest time of all. She was plain Anne. That is, only her name was plain, for she turned out to be the pale blonde American beauty in the family. The only Hispanic thing about her was the affectionate nicknames her boyfriend sometimes gave her. Anita, or as one goofy guy used to sing to her to the tune of the banana advertisement, Anita Banana. Later, during her college years in the late 60s, there was a push to pronounce third world names correctly. I remember calling her long distance at her group house and a roommate answering, can I speak to Anna? I asked, pronouncing her name the American way. Anna? The man's voice hesitated. Oh, you must mean Anna. Our first few years in the States, though, ethnicity was not yet in. Those were the blonde, blue-eyed, bobby-sock years of junior high and high school before the 60s ushered in peasant blouses, hoop earrings, sarapes. My initial desire to be known by my correct Dominican name faded. I just wanted to be Judy and merge with the Sallys and the Janes in my class. But inevitably, my accent and coloring gave me away. So where are you from, Judy? New York, I told my classmates. After all, I had been born blocks away at Columbia Presbyterian Hospital. I mean, originally. From the Caribbean, I answered vaguely, for if I specified, no one was quite sure on what continent our island was located. Really? I've been to Bermuda. We went last April for spring vacation. I got the worst sunburn. So, are you from Puerto Rico? No, I sighed, from the Dominican Republic. Where's that? South of Bermuda. They were just being curious, I knew, but I burned with shame whenever they singled me out as a foreigner, a rare, exotic friend. Say your name in Spanish. Oh, please say it. I had made mouths drop one day by rattling off my full name, which, according to the Dominican custom, included my middle names, mother's and father's surnames for 4 generations back. Julia Altagracia Maria Teresa Alvarez Tavares Perello Espaillat Julia Perez Roche Gonzalez. I pronounced it slowly, a name as chaotic with sounds as a Middle Eastern bazaar or market day in a South American village. My Dominican heritage was never more apparent than when my extended family attended school occasions. For my graduation, they all came, the whole lot of aunts and uncles and the many little cousins who snuck in without tickets. They sat in the first row in order to better understand the Americans' fast-spoken English. But how could they listen when they were constantly speaking among themselves in florid-sounding phrases, rococo consonants, rich rhyming vowels? Their voices carried. Introducing them to my friends was a further trial to me. These relatives had such complicated names, and there were so many of them, and their relationships to myself were so convoluted. There was my tia Josefina, who was not really an aunt, but a much older cousin, and her daughter, Aida Margarita, who was adopted, una hija de crianza. My uncle of affection, Tio Jose, brought my madrina, Tia Amelia, and her comadre, Tia Pilar. My relatives rarely had more than a mom and dad to introduce. After the commencement ceremony, my family waited outside in the parking lot while my friends and I signed yearbooks with nicknames which recalled our high school good times. Beans and pepperoni and Alcatraz. We hugged and cried and promised to keep in touch. Our goodbyes went on too long. I heard my father's voice calling out across the parking lot, Julita, vámonos! Back home, my tios and tias and primas, mami and papi, and mis hermanas had a party with many gifts. That was a plus to a large family. I got several wallets and a suitcase with my initials and a graduation charm from my godmother and money from my uncles. The biggest gift was a portable typewriter for my parents for writing my stories and poems. Someday, the family predicted, my name would be well known throughout the United States. I laughed to myself, wondering which one I would go by.